This week's episode was brought to you by The Myriad and Jason Hackman. Thank you, Jason and The Myriad. It's with the generous support of listeners like you that we get to keep making shows connecting esoteric dots and revealing obscure truths every single week. If you'd like to become one of our shadow contributors, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will earn you access to all of our extended shows, our Discord server with the giant mechanical talking oracle head, and a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our cover art sent to you at no additional cost. If you're a seeker who would like access to the volumes of show notes we use to record the show, there's a $10 option as well that comes with a bonus holographic sticker designed by Mari-sama. Unusually, this week's topic found us. What began as a casual investigation into Bible stuff slowly revealed insight into a long-requested topic, the Nephilim, or giants of the Old Testament. We explore first the fall of the angels from an archaeological perspective of ancient Hebrew polytheism, Egyptian religion, and finally Sumerian mythology before dissecting the esoteric contents of Jack and the Beanstalk using biblical symbolism. In the extended show, we discuss Shemyaza, the book of Enoch's fallen angels, the discovery of giant bones, Moses' conquest of the Holy Land, why George Bush is evil, and how the Smithsonian has fooled us all by attempting to cover up the truth. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
I've had people that really hate my voice, and it's usually chicks. I remember this one time I was trying to diffuse like this escalating situation at my old job, and the woman just like turned to me and she said, "Fuck you, baby voice."
I can hear your tail wagging.
Knocking shit off the table with the tail.
Well, I don't have a tail. I have a stub.
Right,
Oh,
Corgi. Well, they're not
Corgis.
born with stubs.
Well, I wag my butt. That's the whole thing.
I had never seen a baby corgi until this morning.
They're adorable. They're little loafs.
Yeah.
Loafs of love.
I honestly didn't know that they had long tails until I saw one that didn't have its tail docked.
They're related to the same ancient breed that German Shepherds come from.
Really?
Yeah, but they're just like a midget version because they were in a smaller geographical area.
And they've been deliberately bred to have stumpy legs.
Yeah, they're
Stumpy
compact.
legs. Yeah. I think corgis are adorable. They're
But yeah,
kind of
they come-
assholes.
They come from a Swedish Valhund. The German Shepherds got taller and bigger, and then the Corgis got smaller and more compact. Because they live in the mountains, you know, it's kind of hard to maneuver yourself.
She called them Schnitzelhund.
No, Swedish Valhund.
Did you see the picture that I posted? It says, this is a wiener retriever, just like your mom. Yeah, a wiener retriever.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just trick our Sky Daddy into becoming an irrigation ditch and fend off his wife, the forces of primordial chaos, by getting our sun to do all the work, only to let the gods starve in the aftermath of the gargantuan conflict. Nay, we hide somewhere sleeping before Mom finds us, demanding we get our shit together and make some humans because this bread isn't gonna bake itself. And by the way, here's some blood from a demon, and make sure to use it because this week we're discussing the Nephilim, the race of people-eating giants that were taken for granted when God himself wrote the Old Testament. I'm your host, Hack Rabbit. I'm joined this week by Mari Slingshot Sama,
Oi, time to kill Samson. Wait, no.
the man with a steak and garlic who's not opening a restaurant, Malachor 5.
I'm hungry.
And the lady of liturgical lentils, Heka Astra.
Hello.
You're the magic bean girl this week.
Lentils.
If you put a lot of butter in lentils, they're delicious. So I wanted to have kind of a laid back episode because I'm going to be busy, I'm going to be traveling. And so I thought we'd have an episode where we just talk about whatever comes to mind, maybe put a little bit in the notes. But we sort of accidentally ended up researching an entire episode about the Nephilim.
Whoopsie doodle.
Oops, I accidentally the whole Nephilim. So who are the Nephilim?
The disgusting beasts that came from the mating between angels that defied God and the humans that they were meant to look after. I mean, that's how I understood it.
Now, Wikipedia says mysterious beings or people in the Hebrew Bible who are large and strong. The word Nephilim is loosely translated as giants in some translations of the Hebrew Bible, but left untranslated in others. Jewish explanations interpret them as a hybrid sons of fallen angels. We talked quite a bit about angels last week. and discovered that angels, for the most part, were an idea from before Abrahamic and even Greek religion. They usually represented a team of lesser gods, serving a primary god. To see this old motif reflected in the Bible, we have only to look at Psalms and their origins. Sometime in the late 1800s, as the modern world began to fashion itself on combustion engines and fiat currency, there was slumbering an ancient mystery in the forgotten sands of Luxor, once known to its proud inhabitants as Thebes. There, plucked nearly intact from the ancient city, was a papyrus scroll from nearly 700 years before the birth of Jesus. This veritable tome, though legible, was written in a familiar alphabet, but seemingly in gibberish. In 1944, however, a breakthrough was made and the papyrus, now known as Amherst 63, was made decipherable. One of the reasons this papyrus is so intriguing is due to the multiple cultural influences that went into it. It's a collection of Aramaic texts containing 3 Israelite psalms, but it is written in Egyptian Demotic.
So Egyptologists were familiar with Demotic, but not the use of Demotic for a foreign language. And it's because of this anomaly that it took 2 Egyptologists and a Semitic language specialist just to figure out that it was actually Aramaic that was written in Demotic script. After that, a small section containing blessings of Syrian and Babylonian gods was translated from it, but in total it actually took 120 years just to fully decipher the script due to its unusual nature.
To the surprise of scholars everywhere, it included an expanded edition of Hebrew Psalms 20, preserved in an ancient, prototypical form of Judean polytheism, replete with golden bulls and other associated practices that would later become heretical.
Nice.
Like that golden calf stuff, that was just normal for them.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, I'm going to bring this up every episode, apparently, because, the god Samael from the Silent Hill series, that was part of that practice as well. In fact, that you could worship angels and these entities in order to gain certain types of powers. It was almost like polytheism for sure.
Absolutely. Amherst 63 describes the combined theological worldview of 3 Semitic peoples who had settled as mercenary forces along the southern Nile near modern Aswan. There had long been a tradition of mercenary work for land trade in the area, as the Egyptians had long preferred to outsource their military, like security guards. This resulted in Syrian, Babylonian, and Jewish settlers commingling in the area. Amherst 63, as far as we can tell, seems to be an attempt to reconcile the menagerie of gods and theological outlooks from each of these Semitic cultures into one harmonious gel, using stars and constellations to link their narratives.
Like astrology?
Astrology.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great statement, and it's not just these cultures. They're all, like, everybody on the planet was looking at the same sky. We're specifically going to be talking about what went down in Egypt in this episode, and Babylon and the Middle East.
Sumeria.
The section concerning Jewish gods and practices contains an early version of Psalms 20, along with 2 others that never made it into the Old Testament and are older than the ones that did. The psalm that did make the cut is a shorter edition dedicated to the ancestral Yahoo, the name of the Jews of Elephantine Island, used when referring to Yahweh. The epithet given to Yahoo included our bull and the more familiar Adonai, or Lord. In the text, Yahoo is also given the association with Bethel, which is later announced by Israelites in the north as heresy, referenced in Jeremiah 48:13. In Jeremiah, it's frowned upon as an older southern Judean throwback to polytheism. Likewise, Moses is none too happy to discover that his followers have fallen back into using golden calves, and when he comes back from his little talk with the angel of the Lord on Mount Sinai, he's like, no, I'm not going back to those times.
Very progressive.
The slaying of the bull into the next age.
It's like they went back to using hard drives instead of solid state, and he was just like, come on, we don't do this anymore. So Psalms 20 comes from a time when the Elephantine Jews worshipped Yahweh at the head of a council of gods, a sentiment we see reflected by the words like Elohim in Genesis of the Old Testament, referring to God as a council rather than a singular person. To the Elephantine Jews, Yahweh derived his power from being the head of this council of gods, and still is even referred to that way in Psalms 82. In one of 2 psalms, never made it into the Old Testament, Yahweh's rules described much like the way it is in Ugarit texts, many hundreds of years earlier. They describe God's council as being proclaimed by a multitude of gods, depicted as stars, more numerous than the sands.
So the first 3 sections of the Amherst Papyrus contains Babylonian, Syrian, and Jewish rituals. These 3 sections focus respectively on Nabu and Nane first. Secondly, Bethel and his female consort Anat Bethel, also known as the Queen of Heaven, and referred to in the Elephantine Papyrus as Anat Yahoo. The third section focuses on Yahweh, and the fourth section often equates the gods with each other. Psalm 20 in this papyrus is sung to Yahweh, and the other two psalms that didn't make it are quite directly polytheistic texts that still celebrate Yahweh. The first psalm equates Yahweh to the Aramaic deity Bethel, like Luke said, whose name actually means house of God. The Amherst papyri sheds some new, much-needed light on the god Bethel, because we didn't know much before that, and it finds parallels that likewise equate Bethel to the god Baal.
Wah, wah, wah. I thought Bethel and his female consort, Anat Bethel, was interesting because it sounds like Anat Mon. You have like the positive aspect or the thing with qualities, and then you have the Anat or the negative thing without qualities or without being. So it's kind of like ultimate being and ultimate non-being is what that pair sounds like, at least to me. And the Queen of Heaven was an old motif that the ancient Israelites used to have, but it fell out of practice. And we see this with the Asherah poles because they used to refer to, well, I guess like Yahweh's wife or El's wife.
Yeah, like the divine feminine in early Judaism. They definitely suppressed that energy, and it's reflected in the worlds, or at least the countries that they've conquered.
Yeah,
with the religious practice. It's reflected in the way that our governments are operating.
Yeah, this is pretty good evidence that they viewed them as two parts of a whole.
They were reading the name Yahweh again. It reminded me from this PBS documentary. They were in Jerusalem, and you just would hear the people in the background like screaming like different things, and sometimes it was like Yahweh or Yahoo. And I wondered about that. And yeah, it's actually a thing. And they really, like, everybody around you will kind of get enthusiastic and cheer with you. It also reminds me of Yahoo's.com's name. It's an acronym for yet another hierarchical officious oracle.
What?
I thought that was kind of spot on, right? Like, we're talking about ranks of divine powers, and this is just yet another oracle.
An official ranking mechanism, yet another one, like another search engine. But it's an oracle, which is the search engine part, the AI part.
According to wise and lovable magician Lon Mila Duquette, you can pronounce Yahweh however you want, like Yahoo or Yahoo. It's fine. You can say however.
Yeah, I can read that as Yahoo, like Yod-He, Vod-He, like if you give it a swing.
Yoo-hoo.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Baal literally just means owner, master, or lord, and it was a title that could apply to any deity. And if we just look at it from like a basic tarot cards perspective, we know that Bet means house. If El means father or God, then that would mean
Bet
house of
El,
God or God house.
Bet El Ham, town of God's house.
Essentially.
Where he lives. That's the point.
So at some point, many of these old Judean themes fell out of style and became associated with idolatry and paganism. We see this in Hosea 13. When Ephraim spake trembling, he exalted himself in Israel, but he offended in Baal. He died. And now they sin more and more and have made them molten images of their silver and idols according to their own understanding. All of it the work of the craftsmen, they say of them. Let the men that sacrifice kiss the calves. Therefore, they shall be as the morning cloud, as they are the early dew that passeth away, and the chaff that is driven with the whirlwind out of the floor, and as the smoke out of the chimney. Yet I am the Lord thy God from the land of Egypt, and thou shalt know no God but me, for there is no Savior besides me. Curiously, this is not the first time a council of gods was suddenly repressed in favor of the, quote, one true God, and even here mentions being a god from the land of Egypt.
Oh, nice. Akhenaten time.
We're talking about Psalms, and I remembered from some band that I listened to, I can't remember what song, but they were talking about this, how Psalms 104, for some sections, it's very similar to the great hymn to the Aten. Akhenaten was a pharaoh. He kind of changed the rule, or like the way that they worship things by law, by saying that there was only one God, and according to legend, wrote the hymn himself. And this is another song saying that there is really only one God. There's not a lot of gods. It's all by him. Like when he sleeps, everything else sleeps. Like it's this weird parallel wording. That's kind of like in direct defiance to Egyptian practice. As we know, they had many gods. So his son was actually a Tutankhamun. He kind of didn't like what his father did and declared it heretical to his new say on how Egyptians should be living their lives.
They basically scratched him out of all the hieroglyphs too and defiled all of his statues and all that, tried to erase him. Nobody really liked him because they wanted to go back to being polytheists.
So Aten is the sun disk. He's specifically the sun disk, the sun. And when he put into place that you can't worship anyone but Aten. People were pretty choked, but obviously they had to do that. When Akhenaten died, there was a couple intermediary people that ruled for a couple years before his son Tutankhamun took over. And that's because Tutankhamun was so young. I think he was only like 9 or 10.
He was a boy
by the time that he actually came to throne. But his birth name was actually Tutankhaten. And after he took the throne, he changed his name to Tutankhamun. And yeah, he did make that decision to give people's religious or spiritual freedoms back. He kind of did think that was like a really shit thing to do. But he also might have done that under the advice of his council. I mean, because he was so young when he was a pharaoh.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
He definitely wasn't old enough to be like, this is what's right for the future of everybody. I'll give them all their gods back.
Yeah.
He definitely.
Is this possibly the fabled King Tut?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's King Tut, and he hailed in a new golden age, and that's the last golden age that I think Egypt had.
You can kind of see that he was a pretty well-liked pharaoh just by how many riches and stuff ended up in there and how well preserved it was. There was very little grave robbing that happened.
Oh.
His entire tomb was untouched aside from the opening section.
Ooh.
So no one grave robbed his tomb at all.
All the priests that weren't allowed to practice for all those years were saving up their best curses. And they just were ready to protect King Tut's tomb with them. Every time you got near King Tut's tomb, like, you just started bleeding out of your butthole. And it was bad news bears.
And there's a lot of relics of his, including his sarcophagus is one of the most famous ones that was recovered. His mummy is perfect. Like, it was perfectly preserved. That's where they found the jars where they mummify your remains and stuff. It was the best specimen of a tomb that they had found in a long time.
There was literally thousands and thousands of items that came out of that tomb.
And to think his father was just wiped off the face of the... I mean, you can see hieroglyphs where it was scratched out like someone was really pissed off.
There was also pharaohs after Tutankhamun. They wanted to take credit for what he did. And so even Tutankhamun had his name scratched off of certain statues and structures and stuff and had other pharaohs put their name over top.
I did it.
Yeah, they wanted to take all the credit.
It was me. Asshole.
To distance from the family even further, right?
He changed his name to Tutankhamun because he related more to Amun than Aten. And I think part of that decision to allow spiritual and religious freedom to people was also for himself as well.
So
yeah,
I have a lot of respect for the magicians or the magical power of ancient Egypt. And, you know, you brought up that it was like the last golden age, because if you just follow me for a sec, it's like the hymn to Aten, one of the earlier monotheistic egregores, got released. You know, it got charged up and people went with it, and they may have been inspired to write the Bible off of this idea that the sun, specifically in this case, is the thing we should be worshiping. And that empire eventually will come to rule the world, and Egypt couldn't ever come back with, no matter how good their magic was, because it has to stay secret. Yeah.
It's kind of funny to think that Akhenaten failed where the Jewish actually prevailed on turning a polytheistic culture into a monotheistic one.
Mm-hmm.
And they refer to this as the God from Egypt. And honestly, this Judeo-Christian God, this Abrahamic God, it now rules the entire earth, more or less. Our entire timeline is based on it. And some people speculate, because it's become linked to our imperial and patriarchal culture, that's the reason we have to wipe out other cultures that don't agree with our timeline, our theology, or whatever. It's this conflict between a king of the gods and his council goes back a long way. It's interesting to think that the ascent of the one true God as the ultimate power might have begun here with Aten, because this was a conflict that had happened before and involves the creation of humans. In ancient Sumerian, Babylonian, and Akkadian mythology, it is a council of gods serving under the king of gods that create humanity as slaves with the expressed intention of feeding themselves as gods. Like, the gods made humans so they could eat, which is kind of a spooky idea.
I mean, it's like, why would we grow plants or husband animals?
Yeah. I hadn't even thought of that. That makes perfect sense.
And then aphids are farmed by ants for their secretions. And then we farm bees.
We're just food.
I totally agree with that. And it makes God sound like a big, giant, celestial vampire.
Well, that's how vampires think of us, as the food class. But where did vampires begin?
I mean, it's a really old concept, to be honest.
To stay in Egypt about it, Anne Rice, I like her books. I like her vampire universe that she made. I mean, it's what I grew up on, and it was a good movie too. So, like, even the soundtrack for Queen of the Damned is pretty awesome.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
yeah, so the vampires in that series, they start from Akasha, who was a queen in Egypt, and her husband Enlil, who was the king. At one point, they get assassinated, or they get, attempted, murder on their lives, and this ethereal spirit goes inside of the wound that Akasha had succumbed to, and turns her into the first vampire. And with her power, her new game power, she pretty much resurrects her husband, making them the first vampire couple.
Power couple.
For sure.
Grandpa Dracula.
Egyptian Dracula.
OG Drac.
But Kasha is actually a cool Sanskrit word that means aether, which is like the magical, like light energy, or, just what magic, you're shooting magic fireballs and shit.
The void of the sea that we're in, the void of space-time that manifests all matter.
Yeah, it's like a state of matter, I guess.
Or an ocean.
In a scientific sense, yeah. But the name Enlil sounds a lot like a combination of Enlil and Enki, which are, of course, Sumerian gods.
You've almost made me have respect for Anne Rice. That's
Yeah, if you combine the names, Enlil, Enki, you get Enlil. I see it like she's playing a play on words here. It's like a funny joke saying that God is this big celestial vampire, and it's just his agenda to use all of our energy so that we power his divine political party, call it the Elohim or whatever, just so we can hold up his throne forever and ever, so that he can thrive and live forever just like a vampire does. Just follow what he says and be a good servant.
Obey.
Sounds a lot like City 17 in Half-Life.
What do they do to the citizens in City 17? What's enforced on them?
There's this weapon that the Combine uses. It doesn't even make them want to have sex and reproduce. They lose the desire to reproduce. It's like in Russia and stuff, so it's like all this like Russian leader guy who's like their puppet. It's a great game. We should do an episode on it.
You just made me remember that there's some gods drinking human blood in Egyptian mythology. You have the creator god, right? And then you have Ra, who's an aspect of the creator god. And Ra basically wants all of the humans to be good little humans. And he sees that the humans are being kind of assholes and they don't respect him and stuff. And he sends Sekhmet. She's a female aspect of the creator deity. You could call her an aspect of Mut or Nath, who are also aspects of Atum or Ptah. Anyways, he sends Sekhmet down, and Sekhmet just gobbles up a bunch of people. She just goes nuts and starts killing everyone and drinking their blood and stuff. Much like Kali. So there actually is some god vampire stuff going on there.
We can totally see this forced. This is why a lot of the Gnostics say we're in a prison of sorts, because it's a lot like the Garden of Eden. They didn't want to even have sex and reproduce, and at that point you're just an NPC. You're a soulless mechanical support for God.
Cattle.
Yeah, you're just cattle, straight up.
Yeah, the human zoo concept is very interesting to think about as a thought experiment.
And you might be wondering why we bring up Enlil and Enki, but once you hear more about them, you'll begin to see what it has to do with the Bible. There are Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian versions of these stories, and their respective characters change a little bit, but certain themes and motifs are consistent throughout. So we'll do our best to summarize. Enlil is the god of the sky, the wind, storms, and he's considered over the earth. Enlil plays a vital role in the Sumerian creation myth. He separates On, heaven, from Ki, earth, thus making the world habitable for humans. So it sounds a little bit like the Egyptian god Shu. This is where it gets anciently politically incorrect. He repeatedly rapes his consort, who is also his mom. This is considered a metaphor for how the wind pollinates the earth, which eventually wilts and is reborn to be pollinated anew. Gross.
Yeah, that's specifically relevant to this time of year.
According to one Sumerian hymn, Enlil himself was so holy that not even the other gods could look upon him. Donald Trump is eagerly awaiting the challenge. In the Sumerian flood myth, Enlil rewards Ziusudra with immortality for having survived the flood, and in Babylonian flood myth, Enlil is the cause of the flood himself, having sent the flood to exterminate the human race, who made too much noise and prevented him from sleeping. What a dick.
Oh my god.
So to recap, Enlil's like the sky god, and he's the king of the gods, and he's a bit of a dick. He's a little
soy boy.
he
And
likes
a
the
mama's boy. Oh, gross.
Yeah, he likes it non-consensual.
And incest. Gross.
Then you have the other one, Enki, also known as Ea. He was the Sumerian god of wisdom, fresh water, which is also semen, intelligence, trickery, mischief, crafts, magic, exorcism, healing, creation, virility, fertility, and art. He's kind of groovy. Enki is the lord of the earth. He's the son of Anu, the sky god in Sumerian and Akkadian mythology, but the son of Apsu, the primordial father, in Babylonian texts. He's also referred to as the son of the goddess Namu, the primordial mother goddess who gave birth to all the other gods, the earth and the heavens, so on and so forth. This sounds a lot like the Egyptian Mut, or the waters of Nun. It's the idea of a primordial chaos from which everything else arises.
Well, if it's primordial chaos, then it would be Nun.
Yes, it's Namu, Nun. So Enki is the son of Namu, and we can consider him a manifestation of Namu's non-being, in a sense. And he's always on humanity's side. His trickery, much like Prometheus, is usually to help humans and defend them from the gods. In the Babylonian creation myth, the Enu-Milish, 6 generations of God come from Enlil and Ninlil, and everything's going okay until the 7th generation, which to the Akkadians was known as Shapatu, or the Sabbath. And that's when everyone gets fed up with work and goes on strike. Kind of reminds us that there needs to be a day of rest, doesn't it? Interesting how Sabbath ends up being the day of rest. So co-creator of the universe, Father Apsu, the god of freshwater, threatens to destroy the universe over this employment strike. Depending on the version, Enki either kills or subdues his father, Apsu, which pisses off the other co-creator, Mother Tiamat, the god of saltwater. She raises an army of demons against her son and all of creation. At the head of this army is her son, Kingu, the archdemon of sorts. He likes Satan. He bad.
Kingu's a cool name.
Kingu. Depending on the version, either Kingu's son Marduk or Enlil promises to slay Tiamat after being made the king of the gods and succeeds by throwing arrows down her throat. Now, after the conflict, all the gods are crying because there's nobody to make their bread. They're very hungry. According to the Akkadian version, Enlil asks his primordial mother, Namu, to find a solution. She replies that with the help of Enki, her son, they'll be capable of creating humans in the image of the gods. Wah, wah, wah. Starting to see where some stories got ripped off just a little bit. Enki is off sleeping someplace, but Namu eventually finds him and charges him with creating humans to work for the gods. Enki assembles a team of divinities to help him, creating a host of good and princely fashioners to make humanity out of clay. Enki is reluctantly coerced into using some of Kingu's blood, the demon lord, as the special ingredient when creating humanity, and this is why humanity is fucked up evil and generally a dick. Like they made him use Kingu's blood. They're like, hey, you should use Kingu's blood. And he's like, no, I don't want to. And they're like, do it! God, okay, mom. Let's see. At some point, humans become too powerful and make too much noise for the king of the gods, Enlil, to sleep and do his duties, so he decides to kill them all with a flood. Enki decides to warn a single human who had always been loyal to him and showed him exemplary character. Enki informs his human, Atrasis, to create a giant ark and fill it with 2 of every animal on Earth. And once the flood subsides, Enki instructs Atrasis to make a burnt offering to Enlil to show that he's one of the good humans. Enlil is incredibly pissed off at first, but he smells the burnt offerings and is talked into allowing humans to live as long as Ninnersog gives them a patch update, which includes miscarriages, infertility, sickness, demons carrying away infants, virgins consecrated to the gods, low semen count, perpetual war, abuse, thievery, self-harm, and disaster that would keep the population in check from this day forward.
Awesome. Best roller coaster in the cosmos.
Atrasis gets to check out to heaven before the new patch update, thanks Enki and Enlil.
It's like a horrible, but also funny.
And so we talked a little bit about this before, how religious devotion in general can be considered vampiric. You sort of pick a god and you're made to devote yourself to them and give all your energy to them. And if you look at Anne Rice's Queen of the Vampires, Akasa really does mean sky. And presumably we were created to feed these sky gods. We were made to make bread. That's our job. We're here to make bread. We're bakers. We bread.
Does bread include money? Some people call money bread.
We are the money. We the bread.
Jesus.
So if humans were made as food slaves for the god, then it makes some sense that the offspring of the two would naturally want to consume whatever the humans had to feed it. Which brings us to the giants, or the Nephilim. I think an even better starting point than the Bible would be just good old Jack and the Beanstalk. You guys remember Jack and the Beanstalk?
Oh, yeah. It was one of my favorites.
You know, I was a little bit skeptical at first when he said that he was going to talk about Jack and the Beanstalk. And then he explained it to me, and I was like, oh, yes, this makes sense.
Oh, I'm going to talk about Jack and the Beanstalk.
I never made these connections before.
So the tale was simple enough. Once upon a time, there was an impulsive boy named Jack who lived with his widowed mother. It's safe to assume, based on the story, that most of Jack's problems probably boiled down to not reading his Bible. Had he read at least to the 4th chapter of Genesis, he might have recalled God's favor of Abel over Cain when the good brother correctly offered his cattle. Cain, the bad brother, his offering of crops was rejected. Forgetting this most fundamental lesson in value, Jack trades his mother's cow for a handful of magic beans. When he tells his mom what he did, she thunders at Jack, "You fool!" and cast the beans through the window. Maybe gave him a spanking, doesn't say that. To both of their surprise, the next morning the beanstalks have grown so tall that one could climb it to the very heights of heaven, which is what Jack ultimately does. This imagery recounts yet another biblical pair of feuding brothers, Esau and Jacob. After all, Jacob is the origin for Jack's name. Jacob and Esau were grandkids of the biblical patriarch Abraham. Without the intercession of Zadkiel, the angel of mercy, Isaac would have never grown up at all. This was the son Abraham had been commanded by God to sacrifice. Ironically, as things often are, Isaac would live the longest of his brothers and was fast approaching 40 when it occurred to him that if he were to make any children, ones that would inherit the fantastic birth lottery of Abraham's covenant with Yahweh, he would have to have sex with a woman. In order to get some help, he had one of his servants find him one in Mesopotamia named Rebekah. Rebekah had earned this fate by offering Abraham's servant and his camels some water. In reply, the servant gave Rebekah some expensive jewelry that she immediately went to show her family. Now obliged, Abraham's servant was invited to stay. Following a lavish banquet, he refused to leave until he could take Rebekah with him. Although reluctant at first, Rebekah was ultimately sent home to Isaac along with one of her family doctors just to make sure she was okay. She got kidnapped. To Isaac's dismay, the couple had been married many years and presumably had sex at least a handful of times, but no pregnancy occurred. Isaac was 60 and beginning to worry Rebekah was barren. Worried, Isaac prayed fervently, and thankfully, Yahweh strengthened his elderly seed with enough juju to finally produce his son, Esau, and his son, Jacob.
They always just straight up blame the woman.
This dude's like a grandpa. It's like, she's barren.
But it's obviously her fault.
It's like, bro, you're shooting blanks, man.
He's like 39. I gotta have sex.
She probably told him to stop fapping, eat some fucking cow meat, go to work.
Now, Jacob, like Jack, was close with his mom, while Esau was the favorite of his father, Isaac. As a patriarchal society, this put Esau in a favorable position as the father Isaac grew old, blind, and weak. To consummate the passing of Isaac's wealth to his eldest son, he sent Esau out to hunt him and bring him back a piece of venison so he would have strength to do the blessing. This was the moment Rebekah had been waiting for. While Esau was out, Rebekah instructed Jacob how to deceive his father by disguising himself as Esau, which he did and successfully received his father's blessing in exchange for none other than a bowl of lentil bean soup. This immediately precedes Jacob having to flee into the wilderness where he is given the vision of the ladder into heaven.
Jacob's ladder, just to be clear.
Oh boy, here we go. And Jacob went out from Beersheba, and he went toward Haran, and he lighted upon the place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord God stood beside him and said, I am the Lord God, the God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. Who's your dad? The land whereupon thou liest, to thee will I give, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, the east, the north, and the south. And in thee and thy seed shall the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee whithersoever thou goest, and will bring back thee unto this land. and I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken. And Jacob awakened out of his sleep, and he said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid, and said, How full of awe is this place? This is none other than the house of God, the gate of heaven. House of God, Bethel. And Jacob rose up early in the morning, and took the stone that he had put under his head, and set it up for a pillar, and poured upon it oil, and called the name of that place Bethel. The name of the city was Luz at the first. So they used to call it Luz, but Bethel was his new name.
There's a stone that the Scottish people have gotten back from the royal family of England, and they claim that stone is the stone that is in the story here. And all the queens and kings of England, since this stone was retrieved, apparently, were coronated, even Queen Elizabeth, on a throne that sat on top of this rock, right? Well, the Scottish people have gotten it back in the 1960s, and if Queen Elizabeth is to, pass, whoever comes up next will be the first royal member of the family to not be coronated, and thus not official according to the law, is that stone has to be under the throne, and the Scottish people don't want to give it back. The Stone of Scone.
The Stone of Scone.
Yeah, it's like an ice cream. Like, you think it's like a freaking scone, but it's not. It was taken by these like pranksters in 1950 by these college kids. They almost got caught by the cops at the time, and they fucking dropped it, and it cracked in half. So even if it does come back, it's
only half works.
This is like, according to legend, it's the stone that Jacob put his head on and dreamt, or whatever happened, had visions.
Wow. One tamale, two tamale. Now there's two of them.
They should just put it back together with gold like the Japanese do.
Yeah. It was in the throne in Westminster Abbey, which is where they do all the official coronations of the Queen or the royal family, I mean.
Well, this is an English tale, for starters.
Yes.
So to recap, what does this have to do with Jack and the Beanstalk? Here we have the mother's favorite, the upstart Jack, whose adventure with a ladder leading into heaven that promises his father's inheritance is preceded by a problematic trading of cattle for beans. After all, what most versions of the story fail to mention is that Jack is not a skilled thief, but is actually retaking his birthright, as the giants had been the ones to steal his father's riches, which is what left Jack and his mother in destitute poverty in the first place. So, in terms of Bethel, house of the father god, this is probably his father's house as well. Likewise, Jack's mom is proud each time Jack returns with another piece of dad's treasure from the giant's house. In most versions, he returns first with giant gold coins, a goose that lays golden eggs, and a fancy angelic harp that plays all by itself. Each time, Jack narrowly avoids the giant who, smelling his blood, thirsts to consume Jack and grind his bones to make his bread. Fee, fi, fo, fum, and all that business. Interesting, considering the old race of gods would needed us to produce them bread. Judging by the giant's familiarity with the smell of blood and the delicate process of turning bones into something as common as bread, we might infer that Jack is not the first human the giants would have eaten. After all, anyone who's read Homer's Odyssey or the books of Moses might know that the giants with their ferocious appetites will eat just about anything, especially people. Jack himself almost ends up being eaten when the harp that plays itself undergoes a sudden and inopportune bout of Stockholm Syndrome, alerting the giant to Jack's impending escape. Fortunately, Jack is swift as a bunny, scurries down the beanstalk, and hacks it down before the giant can get too far, sending him plummeting down to the earth to his death. Houses with the re-entry vector were evacuated via the Chinese emergency broadcasting system. Jack and his mother became filthy rich, and everybody lived happily ever after. So is Jack and the Beanstalk a morality play sneakily woven together with fundamentally Judeo-Christian symbolism? Although we cannot say for sure, I cannot help but notice an interesting piece of hidden symbolism that might suggest it may. For starters, it's interesting that this stone we're talking about, the pebble of Bethel, is directly related to the coronation process of the English royalty, this being an English piece of folklore. I couldn't help but wonder if the bean had symbolism, and of course it does. The word seed is used over and over and over by the angel of the Lord when he speaks to Jacob and shows him the ladder. So I thought, well, what if we look at the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, Yod-He, Vav-He? Well, you start with Yod, which is like the bean, and then his mom throws it out the window. In Hebrew, He, the second letter in the name of God, means window. And then the next letter in the Tetragrammaton is like that little bean, the Yod, but with a really long stalk, and this is a Vav. And then the final letter is hey, and this could be like the sky or the window to the sky. And I thought, whoa, they put the Tetragrammaton in the story itself. So putting symbolism aside, by the time Jack and the Beanstalk began taking the English form we know today, it was well established in cultural and religious mythology that giants eat people. In Homer's Odyssey, for example, Odysseus and his men narrowly escape being eaten on the island of Cyclops. But how did they get there? Where did they come from? To answer this, we have only to look to the apocryphal book of Enoch and its subsequent description of the fall of the angels.
Woo!
But if you'd like to hear more about the fallen angels and how they made giants with women's people, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 gets you access to all our extended shows, access to our Discord server where you can talk to us about this crazy stuff, and I'll even send you a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our big bosomed cover art, with which you can put on the front of your vehicle that has expansions in it that allow you to push a button that make you eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew, 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 pew.